We're the Vinyl Verdict, and today we're talking about Mind Games by John Lennon, his follow-up to Sometime in New York City, which was released in 1973. And we're getting into a lot of details. This is the original vinyl from October 73, but we're going to go through also the new release, obviously, and a lot of our thoughts and impressions on that. To give some context on it, so this is recorded July and August 1973, very quickly in about 2 weeks with some musicians in New York City. It was released on October 29th. So pretty quick turnaround within 2 months of recording it. This is out on the shelves, and it's John Lennon's fourth album after the Beatles. It got pretty mixed reviews overall. It charted to number 13 in the UK, but number 9 in the US, which is not bad, but it didn't really sell as many copies as his other albums. And it's kind of weird because, so The Lost Weekend officially starts in February 74. Sometimes it's mentioned that they were separated in June and stuff. I don't think so, and Yoko is in the studio talking to him and everything, so I think this is all very much pre-separation. Even the release of the album, very much pre-separation. And kind of interesting because, as we said with Mind Games when we did the single review, this is the final cleanup of a lot of the songs that he wrote in 1970 and 71. I mean, this must have been an interesting time period for you because Sometime in New York City is recorded in early 72. He's on Dick Cavett in May of 72, so he's all over the place, doing the one-to-one concerts in August 72. So 72 is a big year. John Lennon's in America, all this exposure. Yes. 73, he's kind of gone. He's not really having a big PR front. He's obviously dealing with the visa issues and all of that. But yeah, let's go track by track and then I'll call out some of the other stuff. So, Mind Games, we talked about the single already. I don't think we have that much to add here. The Elemental mix was kind of interesting here because there's an earlier version, and I never realized that the picking he's doing is the claw hammer finger style picking, which he used so often in Dear Prudence, the demo to I've Got a Feeling, Look at Me, all these songs. And still here, he was using it obviously in the origin of this song. So
I guess supposedly Donovan showed him that in India or something like that, and then he picked up that style quite a bit on Julia and on other songs.
Then we get into Tight As, which I had never heard the picking before. It's much more clear exactly what's going on there. And it's the second track. It has a lot of parallels to like the Crippled Inside kind of thing with an Imagine of having like that country break after a heavy ballad. Feels a little bit too long and self-indulgent. It's 4 minutes long, which I never realized that feels a little excessive, but it's a fun song, I think, and you can tell John Lennon's having fun with it.
It always was. It was, you never put it in the category of a classic heavy rocker, but it rocked along with a country-ish kind of, bounce to it, and it was fun.
But it's not breaking new ground or anything with these.
No.
Aisumasen, the next track, is probably what a lot of people think of when they think of Mind Games, which is like these kind of slower down ballad apology songs or deeply. It's introspective, but it's not really going as far as he used to with the introspection. There's no personal detail that he's really sharing, or the way that he used to go into his childhood or his mistakes and everything. It's a little bit generic, I think, overall.
It seems like a kind of like a sorry, not to be trite or trivial about it. It's a big track, and there's some bluesy guitar playing on it, which I enjoyed at the time and still would enjoy today.
And I think it makes more sense in the context of The Lost Weekend. Then this, but without that, and it is kind of before that happens, it's just missing some type of a resolution or build or something in there. It goes on a little too long. It's in 3/4 time also, which I think when you have a song in 3/4 time for that long, it's kind of lethargic. So yeah, I mean, I do like the raw mixes of this better because his vocals shine through a little more. I think they sound a little overproduced on the final version. So then we get into 4, One Day at a Time. Very mixed reception in the fan community about this song. A lot of people really don't like it. I'll say this, it could have been slower. I do like that it has a decent pace throughout, and it's a little bit of that proto house husband type writing he would do later on, I think, with Double Fantasy. So, I do like the versions on here that are in the lower octave. It obviously stands out to have him do a whole song in falsetto, but it's a little bit weird to hear the whole song in that register.
Like a lot of songs on this, I'm not sure, at the time, this was a very enjoyable track, and I wasn't aware of, but, now One Day at a Time seems like it's just a almost cliche, and just one of the phrases we use. And it was done in the falsetto and all that. But I can only say a lot of these tracks were simply enjoyable at the time. And even though it was obvious at the time the critics were not going to do somersaults over this album, I was happy to have a John Lennon album at the time. And yeah, it's a kind of a generic title for a song, and it kind of worked for me. Maybe he hasn't aged all that well, but at the time it was all enjoyable.
Yeah, I think he's writing it intentionally to be a little cliche, but then you can produce it in a way that's a little more sappy. Like, I think about it almost fitting on like Magical Mystery Tour. Is like a Your Mother Should Know, Blue Jay Way, if they made the vocals maybe a little more droning or something like that, but it doesn't lean into the fact that, it has that. So the fifth song is Bring on the Lucy. When I was younger, I really liked this, where it sounded like Beatle John. Like, he has so much energy when it kicks off and in some of the yells throughout it. People don't like the song, but we're not here to talk about what other people think. I do think it's one of the higher, other than Meat City, probably the most energetic track on here. And I like that the melody also, it's very monotonic, or maybe even like that police siren thing he's known for, that he does in I Am the Walrus and Strawberry Fields, where he's kind of just going between two notes. He wants to get this message out, and it's not about the melody or anything like that. And obviously this is probably the most political song on the album as well, so it may be left over from the Sometime.
It's interesting musically that it has the way do it. Is that do it now?
Well, that's what people say. So it's a lot like the John Sinclair song, which I don't know what you call that genre, but he's just very repetitive.
It's kind of, if not for you, partially those chords. That's what I recall listening to it in that chorus over and over again of do it now, and just really. It's really kind of vague. It didn't have the pure idealism of the Imagine album, which we can debate another time. But this album was some remnants of personal things left over, not really focused as highly on that, about himself. You aren't sure what it is. It's a little vaguer. And that's where that song would fit into me.
He does sing it a little bit differently each time. I think the issue is that they're overproducing it. So like the backup singers at this point are starting to lose their novelty. This is like the third track in a row with the backup singers, and they're kind of doing the same thing. So I think using them a little more sparingly would have been nice on this.
And they're really strong on that. They're really, in the chorus, really kind of...
Which is cool that now we have versions with and without that. So we get to, we can strip that out if we want to. So then the last track on side one, Nutopia National Anthem. Did you have any idea what that was?
No. I don't even know where Nutopia was.
But they did the press conference and everything to explain it. But at the time in '73,
it wasn't a big impact. No, it was like.
But did you think maybe like my LP's broken? There's not a song here.
No, I took it immediately as just like the odd John thing, to be different, to throw you a little bit, and even as a young guy, I had enough experience with his music to recognize that it was. Partially a put on or something like that.
That's the only time on the album he really puts it in there. Maybe Mind Games a little bit, you could argue, is also in the same vein, but kind of at the very beginning of that idea of a concept album. But I just think he could have expanded on that a little bit. So we flip it over onto side two, and that kicks off with Intuition, one of the other more upbeat songs to kind of lead us into the second half of the album. The remix here is interesting because it removes a lot of the piano synth, which is pretty much a lot of what I remember in the song. So now it feels very bass driven. The album overall is very bass driven. It's more obvious through this remix. I'm not sure how I feel, and it's been discussed about bringing his screams up so much in the second half of the song. I don't think that was the intention. I do think John's doing that for energy, and a lot of the vocal stuff he did was much more accompaniment, not to be heard as the center stage of these songs. It's not one of my favorite songs. It feels like later John solo career writing. It's a little bit, again, more generic and kind of like a piano Dakota song, but it's upbeat, fair enough.
Yeah, again, I almost think of it as a sister song to One Day at a Time, in that it's all well and good and everything, and just I always liked it also, but it seems a little lighter now with the passage of time. My intentions are good. I have to learn to... John Lennon speaking on a record was something you listened to if you had ever been a Beatle fan, because one of the elements to all that was he was almost a, sometimes at their height, a godlike figure putting words in his music that were going to mean something to you. And so you listen to this too, but now we're talking about intuition and things that, you are familiar with from your own life. And it was cute. It was almost commercial-like jingle-like in the way that it hit me at the time, but it was John Lennon and I enjoyed it.
I agree. I mean, a lot of these sound like he was writing them for like a 2-week turnaround for a movie or a commercial, and one of them wouldn't be used in a commercial, which we'll get to. The next one is Out the Blue. They changed this a little bit too. They in the remix, it doesn't have, I mean, a lot of this album had phasing, which is very 70s dated stuff, but I do like it. It's very Lennon to have the vocal phasing, and this one had acoustic guitar doing some phasing, and I noticed they took that out. But overall, it's a little bit generic 70s. I know people love this piano part and everything. I think, to me, that makes it sound really dated, like this is Elton John rock kind of stuff.
Out the Blue, to me, I put in a different category than the Intuition One Day at a Time. I thought of it as a moving personal song. Even then, without saying that something like that's addressed to Yoko, you know, the words meant something to me, and he was obviously more emotional in the song, and that got through to me. None of this doesn't have any parallel to me on some of his earlier albums or Imagine. Out the Blue, You Blew Away Life's Misery, and it was dramatic, but I enjoyed it.
Only People. Wow, I mean, this one, I really do like this one. Again, it is more of that jingle, and this one was used in a commercial for, I forgot what it was, like a bank or something. I remember I was hearing it.
Wow.
And I always liked this one, and here they really did do it. His vocals sound really close, so this one, they did take off some of those effects. And I thought it has a really good groove to it. It's like a pretty unique groove. I don't know if he came up with that, it was more the studio musicians. And it does, you know, more of a positive protest song, which I think Lennon does really well, especially you know, the late Beatles era and stuff, of like keeping it positive and tactful.
But Only People was a rocker, and with about 3 different main segments. And as you said, and I think it's a great point, that it was a positive, lyrically positive way to address your activism to people, rather than a negative kind of rant. It was a really kind of had a beautiful, we can all do this kind of feel to it. So yes, it was idealistic, but that's the lyrical part of it. Musically, it rocked along. It had distinct sections. The production didn't lend itself too much to this, but I think it was basically a rocker when you play the chords, and I like that about it.
He doesn't really, Lennon did not really comment favorably on anything on this album, but this one especially, he said he couldn't get the lyrics to work, which is kind of weird. I mean, it doesn't really say anything, and the measures are a little bit too short. It's just a couple words each.
Yeah, they run on a little bit.
Now, okay, I will say the back fourth of this album is very strong finish here. So next one, track 10, is I Know. People put this and Mind Games up there as like the top 2 from the album, and I think it shows that it is very, at its core, a Lennon track. The Evolution mix shows that he wrote that guitar riff that is very iconic at the beginning. I think it's a better version of Out of the Blue, right? Or Out the Blue, because it starts acoustic and it builds. All the harmonies in the song are John. So we don't have the backup singers and stuff. He's harmonizing with himself. Especially the ending harmonies are really strong. The bass is a little bit too busy here. That's the one thing I don't like about it. And on the album in general, I think it's too busy. But it's a very authentic Lennon song. And I feel like the production didn't at least completely take us away from that.
Yeah, not completely, but like, yes, and it is a Mind Games kind of level sister, one big song on the album. It's distinct sections, and his harmonizing double track voice throughout was always good, and it's touching, and I think it was kind of something he had applied to several other songs, but just that it's a big song, and each section is pretty big, and they fit, and it was well done, and it holds up.
Then we get into You Are Here, so getting towards the end, and the origin of this was super interesting in the Evolution mix. He actually started writing it on acoustic in 3/4 time, very different melody. The melody to me almost sounds like something like Morrissey would write for the Smiths or something. It's like very different kind of vocal. It almost goes full length and gets even more expansive into, there's 2 different 9-minute versions that we have on the new release, but then it ends up being dialed back for the final release into this 4-minute version, and it almost reined in a little bit. Again, it is sort of ethereal, like Beautiful Boy kind of songwriting, where he's taking you in, and there's something comforting about it, but it's not too monotonous. It's still, you know, kind of pleasant, and
it was just deeply moving because memories. It just was almost therapeutic song to close your eyes and really listen to. And the "You Are Here" idea, if you can really slow yourself down, was was something that I think I recognized at the time as a young person and appreciate more today. I think it's a heck of a track. Maybe it was my favorite.
And I think a lot of it is the accompaniment that they I mean, this is where like Sneaky Pete really shines with the slide playing and makes the entire song. And nobody's really trying to play over him. Like there are these nice full verse pauses to let him play. And then we end the album with Meat City, which was also the B-side to the single Mind Games that we covered. But wow, some of the versions on this release are so cool. So first thing I want to call out, like the drums and bass, when I listen to the other versions, I never realized how much they're doing in the background because it is a little bit buried in the mix. And I think when we talked about it, we said this is such a muddy mix.
Yes.
So now with the new version, you just hear it so well. And there's obviously the studio, the kind of the raw studio mixes and the other demos where we don't have the sound effects on top. In those breaks, I love the way that they come down from the note. And I was trying to listen. I think it's in there maybe for one of them, but not for all of them, where they cut it out completely to put the sound effect in there. That is so cool. I love that moment. I think in general, there are some of the coolest moments on the album where John is back into his Cavern Club rock stuff with this song. Obviously, he does Keep Your Hands Off My Baby at the end of one of the versions. And then another one, he does, he keeps going where he does like the full song and then he says, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to keep singing. What a pro to just launch right into another take. Also, his rhythm guitar in it, you hear him doing kind of the offbeat thing while he's singing. Very cool. Musically, for John, at least one of the moments where he steps forward as a musician and not just as a composer. So really refreshing to hear a lot of that. Even the version, so that we have a demo or a kind of an outtake of them playing through Matchbox and That's Alright Mama. And he's doing most of it in like falsetto or like kind of a soft voice. You know, it just doesn't, he doesn't have the force. And I think maybe that's because he knew these songs didn't. He didn't want to, wreck his vocals, but he just feels very restrained overall. Matchbox is basically in falsetto. And, these songs, I think, capture that, where he's doing this iconic kind of Imagine softer singing, but they don't have the depth that the Imagine songs do. So.
Well, and Meat City would stand out maybe among other reasons because that's rocking and pretty heavy sound.
Well, so this is August. He finishes this. Rock and Roll People was also recorded, which is, we have a version on here. So Rock and Roll People was kind of one of his rock songs that he wrote that I guess was rejected from the album because it was recorded at the same time. And in October, 2 months after this, he's already recording with Phil Spector doing some of the early songs that would make it on the Rock and Roll album. So it's interesting, it's only 2 months after this he starts getting into the rock and roll mood. But you wouldn't know that at all from these tracks and from the outtakes, which don't really seem very rock-driven.
No, it's some kind of mixture of leftover Imagine type and personal songs. Maybe a little less commercial than Imagine, but still real fine. I enjoyed the music.
Very cool. The video of him kind of playing this stuff in 1970, very interesting. But there's no footage of him in 73, and the outtakes even are still mostly just the songs. There's not a ton of dialogue in between them or... even in retrospection, I don't think he really captured a lot of the reason he wrote these songs. The album feels a little phoned in. There's not really a super weak track on it because even the weaker ones are fairly passive, so you can kind of keep them on in the background, and it is all a little bit softer and subdued, I guess. But kind of straight, I'd say in the middle of his discography, both in time and kind of in quality, and that's how it's been rated. So it was interesting to have it get all this attention in 2024 and this massive release.
I lived through it myself and remember that it was great to have a John Lennon album. There was Walls and Bridges coming yet, and there was Mind Games occupies a certain space now where it wasn't his biggest commercial hit, and it was kind of something in between, but loaded with little John Lennon touches, but maybe saying phoned in, or maybe saying to the effect that it was not taken as seriously maybe as some other things would be very, very insightful, I think.
The other thing, the cover, obviously, so I always did think it was a mountain range. Most people that I show this to say right away it looks like Yoko's face.
It is Yoko's face.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was that obvious when I first saw it. But I think the other piece is that he's on his own. This is pre-Lost Weekend, but compared to, I guess, Paul McCartney at the peak of Wings and starting to do big tours in Europe and everything, John's really on his own. I mean, now listening to it and reading about it, obviously he developed a close relationship with these studio musicians, and they did really enjoy it, and there was a live element, but hearing the album on its own, he sounds like he's in his bedroom just recording kind of these, more depressive songs. When you look at what the other Beatles are doing, George is about to do his big tour, he's kind of on top. this is him kind of receding a little bit, I think, in his musical career as well.
I had a quiet relationship with it, but I always played it. I played the heck out of it. And there was nothing else, at that time. It was 1973, and there was Imagine, and there was this, what was known already as kind of a big flop sometime in New York City or whatever it was, proving that political covers don't age that well, I guess. And the music was never, anyway, that's where it was. And so this was really fun. It was like John gave us some candy or something, as opposed to nothing. And it was a lot better than that. And it's aged kind of in a funny way, where it's in between what many consider greater work to come and more commercial work behind it. And nobody quite knows where to put this.
Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.